Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show, Wednesday, December 1st, YC123. Happy soon-to-be holidays. Get ready for the winter event. Get ready for Scarcity Ends Soon. But today I wanted to discuss a bit of a non-story, but it happened, and a lot of, it was one of those things that got a lot of attention really fast. So a lot of people probably saw the original thing, and then it changed really quick, and I hope that people saw the update. So we're going to talk about the whole thing. But more importantly, it reminded me of a story from Eve's past, one of the few stories of Eve's past that I really often don't like to talk about, or I often beat around the bush with it. But I find this is a good opportunity to come in and show off what they're, or really dive into this story or not dive in, but showcase this story when it has time to be discussed. Usually it comes up in the context of other conversations. And so, we're going to talk about Erotica 1. So, that being said, let's jump into the main piece of this story, though. Pulling Concord is now a permaban offense. So, this issue actually started over a month ago. As you can see, October 28th, right? And what it happened was that apparently people were starting to get banned based on pulling Concord away from a gank location. So for those of you who don't understand this mechanic, let me briefly explain. So Concord, the retributive police that goes and kills anybody that gets a criminal flag in high sec, they have there's actually like a Concord fleet, and it warps around. So the Concord response time is dependent on the band of space you're in, right? Not the band of space, but the exact security. So like 0.1 is a very fast response. 0.5 is like almost 30 seconds before they can land or respond. However, because they are a fleet, right, they can hang out at the location afterwards. And so if you were to try to like gank again, for example, they would already be there. Their response time would be 0. So the common tactic would then to not 0.1, you're right. 1.0 down to 0.5. My bad. 1.0 is no Concord. Sorry, 0.1 is no Concord. I'm just going to leave that one the way it is. Y'all figure it out. You know how security stats works. So, but the point is that if you wanted to do repeated ganks on the same grid, you have to pull Concord away. Otherwise, Concord will already be there. And in fact, some groups, like mining groups, may even intentionally pull Concord to an asteroid belt, for example, such that either they have the Concord defense already there, or at least the early warning of Concord being pulled away to somewhere else. So before they can gank again, they have to reset it. And often the way you do it is you get a criminal flag from the gank itself. But that makes it so that you can't be in a ship in high sec for the next 15 minutes. So even if you like dock up and like board a new ship and then undock, then Concord will just show right back up and blow you up again. It's pretty hilarious when it happens. But, people have to learn that lesson. That said, when combined with this other issue, or with this other problem, having to pull away Concord, the solution becomes obvious, right? You have the ganker that just got killed by Concord, now as a pod. He warps to the station. He docks up, hops in a Corvette, undocks. The Corvette causes a criminal. He still has a criminal timer, so that way Concord leaves the gate to go kill the Corvette, opening the gate up for the next gank. Yeah, they do it in Uedama all the time. So what this post is alleging is that rule, that somebody has gotten banned for doing that. Now, a little bit of background story. Well, actually, I want to go over some ground rules before we get any further. First of all, delaying Concord in this fashion, or rather, hold on, I have notes. Delaying Concord in this fashion, as I just described, is not against the rules and has never been against the rules. What has been explicitly made against the rules in the past has been what's called boomeranging, which would be effectively using warps to pull Concord away, or launching, like leaving a whole bunch of ships out that are like attached to you. So that way Concord gets confused and has to attack all that stuff before they get to you, like chafe. Things that make it so that Concord takes longer than it should given the security, right? What this is resetting it so that it does work to the letter of how the security band should. So that's a different issue. The one thing that you could consider is if for some reason you could time it so well that you undock your Corvette, Concord leaves. Actually, it wouldn't even take that much timing. Well, kind of. Concord leaves, then everyone shoots immediately, because then you might add the extra time of Concord traveling to the Corvette, killing the Corvette, and traveling back. In fact, that may in fact be the original source of this issue. Not that somebody dragged it away, but that somebody explicitly ganked at that window of opportunity, adding extra time to the Concord's response. But sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So first of all, ganking and like pulling the Concord away has never been against the rules. In fact, if you think about it, it doesn't make sense for it to be against the rules, because if that was the way it was, then why not just make Concord spawn a new fleet, go kill you, and then despawn? Like, it obviously was such from the very, very beginning that Concord was supposed to be an entity that you could manipulate in very basic ways, right? And I think that this is fair, being able to reset it to their worst case scenario, which would be the known time that it takes for them to respond within the specific point of space. I think that that's perfectly fair. So, but this alleges that somebody got banned. They started talking about it. It goes back and forth. Obviously, the forums does what the forums does. Excuse me. This post alleges that this was pulling Concord is now a permaban offense. We go back and forth about whether or not this is true. We go back and forth about whether or not it should be true, which brings me to my second point, which is that ganking is essential to EVE Online. Sorry, you may not like it, but it's true, okay? Maybe not essential. You could have an EVE Online without ganking, but it would not be as interesting or complex. And interestingly enough, it would be worse for the very people who ask for ganking to be removed. Because with ganking removed from the game, there becomes absolutely zero reason to do anything with your mining ship besides, fit for throughput, and for your haulers to fit for speed and cargo, right? There's no reason to balance your effectiveness in your job with your ability to get to survive within the game, or if something like that goes bad. There's no reason to not bling out your expensive ship for mission running to the absolute nines. So now the standard for missions are going to be a paladin with all purple modules, because you can't gank it. Why not? Right? That's what happens if ganking is not allowed in the game. You need the counter pressure of the threat of ganking in the game to make your gameplay and your decisions interesting. The third thing is on the inverse. I see this all the time. High sec should not be deleted. Okay? First of all, high sec serves a very useful function among all of the others. It provides what I've said for many years as education and engagement, right? High sec is critical to understanding the new player experience. And yes, you may say that high sec is bad for new players, and I would argue that that is why our retention is low. And as they get better, as they build a better high sec, their retention has increased. So what I mean by engagement and education is high sec is designed to give, especially an early player, engagement, something to do, something that doesn't require them to build their own framework or, build a social group, approach a social group or anything like that. They can, which functions to keep them in the game and engaged long enough for them to understand and start to gain mastery, which is the second part, like education, right? The more activities in high sec that can be shifted over towards requiring players proper understanding of the game, increasing understanding of the game, the better that high sec becomes basically a tutorial space. The entirety of high sec, up level 4 missions, all of it should be considered a tutorial of sorts, right? Introducing increasingly difficult concepts and more of them and whatnot. Like that would be the framework that would make high sec really, really effective. They've tended towards that direction in the last few years, and I think that it's really improved things in that regard. We've had a few steps back with things like invasions ending, but ultimately I think that high sec is absolutely invaluable. Because the second point, it isn't an issue of like people deciding between high sec and null sec, right? It's not, if you scare people out of high sec, it's not that they will run and hide to your coat, your skirts in null sec and you'll take care of them. They're going to quit the game. It's not a competition between null sec and high sec. It's a competition between Eve and Final Fantasy XIV, Eve and Star Citizen, Eve and these people's family, right? So we need to give people, if people want to engage with something, we got to give them that. Mining is my quiet time. Exactly. Sometimes people don't want to look over their shoulder. I've said this earlier, that like one of my problems is that sometimes I don't want to have to be paranoid about D-scan. And if I have to do that for everything, then I'm going to play another game, because I'm not playing a game right now to be on edge. I'm playing a game right now to kill boars, I'm trying to hit that lower right-hand corner of the flow where it's like high competency, low demand, relaxation, right? That's what sometimes that's what you want. And Eve should give those people that gameplay too, and that shouldn't necessarily be insulted, right? Because the thing is that here's the thing. That is where muscle memory is built and reinforced, right? We want that. We want piloting in Eve to become more and more second nature. Okay. So ganking people who travel is go, but mining is okay. Ganking people and mining are both essential pieces of EVE Online. Okay, so let's keep going, because I haven't even gotten to what happened today yet. So October 28th, this argument goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. People start posting on things, which brings up my first big point, which is, by the way, before I even show off some of this stuff, posting GM correspondences is against the rules. Now, most of the time, this means like private correspondences, like response to tickets and stuff. But every single time I see things posted from a GM or whatever, I get super sketch. Even like they posted like a screenshot of the forum post, and at first I was like, oh God. Because like, you're not supposed to post GM correspondences, which there's a reason for that, or rather, there's a consequence to that, and we'll talk about that in a second. So they show off the fact that some people are arguing that the thing got changed. Some people are arguing that so this reinforced in 2014 that it was supposed to be that way. This guy kicks back that it was changed in 2015, which I think he's talking about the boomeranging at that point. Goes back and forth, 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 and then it gets shut down by ISD later that day. Look, we're done. Here's the rules about exploits. We're done, right? This is 1 month ago. For some reason, that I believe only GM Arcade may know, GM Arcade decided to post this 1 month later, stating, "Thank you for your patience while this matter is discussed extensively within various departments, including customer support. It is clear that there's some confusion regarding what is an exploit and what is allowed. This has caused some reference to posts by CCPers, which may be outdated. EVE Online and its underlying mechanics continuously change, but the known and declared exploits Help Center article is a definitive reference for exploits that all players should keep an eye on. It's why when we discuss exploits, that's where I go to look for things. We encourage everyone to keep an eye on this. Recently, there has been discussion within the community concerning that Concord manipulation is allowed. We would like to state, echoing the notification linked in the help article, that, quote, all methods of delaying Concord's response time are considered an exploit, end quote. This includes deliberately pulling or spawning Concord to a location for defensive or upcoming aggressive actions. There are simply too many scenarios that may trigger Concord's reaction, and thus would like to ask that players do not deliberately manipulate or interfere with Concord in any way." So when I see a post on the top of Reddit, first thing in the morning, saying that GMs have posted that pulling Concord away is a permanent ban, first of all, my first thought is, bullshit, there must be something wrong. And then I click through and I see this and I'm like, holy what? So, hey, Mike Porter. So let's be clear. This rule, delaying Concord, is explicitly, let's go look, actually. Delaying Concord or completely avoiding it. And delaying Concord response for an extended period commonly involves leaving empty ships or drones in space for Concord to focus on before dealing with the attacker. This exploit is not limited to drones or ships. So if you put things in space to act as chaff against Concord, that's not good. And then it's also a criminal. It's against the rules to prevent the ship from being destroyed by any means. So the ship, when you get a criminal flag and Concord's on their way, that ship has to die. It doesn't matter how clever your trick is. If you do anything to prevent that ship from dying eventually to Concord in a few seconds, then that's the exploit. That's what this exploit is, okay? This, I can assure you, is a very new interpretation. So, everybody melts down. I'm kind of shocked. And then within 30 minutes of me reading it the first time, I go back to look at it again to reference it something else, and I see this giant update. Now, this post was posted after 1 month, 7 hours ago. The last update, I don't care when the last update was, but so within 7 hours, it is clear that the above messaging is too vague and does not provide sufficient details or content convey the intent of the policy changes. For this, you have my apologies. First of all, is this a policy change or not? I would also like to apologize to the CSM who were not consulted before the above post was made. It is fairly typical that the CSM are not consulted as a matter of course when it comes to customer support policies. Should they be? That actually might be the one of the very few places that I think that CSM actually could give some pretty reasonable feedback pretty consistently, regardless of who they are. But in this case, it would have benefited to do so. After this post was made, several CSM members were quick to raise their concerns. After listening to their feedback, we've decided not to implement the policy update mentioned above. They phrase it like it's a clarification. Right? Here. They state it like it's a clarification of the rules. And then they call it a policy change. Was it meant to be an actual policy change? There will be no changes to how support our policing Concord interaction, and that pulling Concord or defensive spawning a Concord is currently permitted. But we reserve the right to change this at a future date. Okay, so that's what happened. First of all, anybody who complains about CCP not reacting to things quickly, I mean, literally before TIS could talk about it, they fixed it. No, yeah, there's no... it doesn't actually... The statement that this is a permaban offense is also kind of inflammatory, it would seem. Even under the best of worst of conditions, unless that person had like previous strikes against them. So let's talk about why this is like the worst, or one of the like just absolutely terrible messaging by CCP. First of all, if this is a policy change, which I'm not sure if it was meant to be. If this is a policy change, why is it being done by a necro-posting lead GM on the EVE forums? What? Like, even if this was true, even if this was what they were going to do, you're telling me you discussed this for a month, and the solution that you came up with was necro-posting a forum post to state a policy change as if it was a clarification. Woo! Let's... Maybe we need to... Maybe we should make it the talking to the CSM about things part of their workflow. Who knows? Like, if anything should be safe to go to the CSM, something like this should be. If anything is the kind of thing that CSM would have feedback on that is actually meaningful for CCP to take into account, it'd be this, right? Talking to them about how they want to change mining is almost useless because, you know, as a game designer, how a game player looks at it is totally different than how you look at it, because you're trying to basically manipulate their behavior through the changes in your game design. So, you know, the feedback is only indirectly useful in some regards. But come on, man, whether or not this is the right thing to do for the community, whether or not this is the right way to put it out to the community, that is definitely something that the CSM could be extremely useful for. So, I have no idea what happened. The big takeaways of this is don't do this via GM. But more importantly, let's remember that this does indicate a clear signal that CCP, and we knew this already, CCP is continually reevaluating the new player experience and, interactions and stuff, and helping make a safer environment for newer players. Deadpool Witch. Yeah, thank you. So this kind of falls into that vein. So I could see why they would want to do this change. But so what I mean by that is expect, just like the compression changes that got pulled back, expect this to not be the end of this story. But good, please, let's message this a little bit better going forward. Thank you. Please and thank you. All right. In addition to that, let's talk about why this policy is bad. Okay. First of all, this goes back to like the fact that these people are being, you know, this guy was banned or supposedly banned without knowing about it ahead of time, which apparently ended up being true. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anymore. Was this policy in effect, and did it cause that person to get banned for that? But either way, the first problem is the issue that anytime you're doing auto detection, you're going to have, you have to err on either the side, well, either the side of false positives, false negatives, or both, right? You're never going to calibrate your detection mechanism to be so good that it never gets a false positive or a false negative. So often when you're in design, when you're designing a system that does require this kind of automation, you think about which one of those two solutions would be the most dangerous, right? Or rather, maybe the better one to go with, right? Is it better to have false positives in this case or false negatives in this case? My point is that they're not going to get it right 100% of the time. And so but worse, having a policy like this, where if a character pulls Concord away and then another character ganks somebody where Concord was, then the character that pulled the Concord away gets punished for that. That person may not have even been aware that the other gank was set up. That person may not even be aware of criminal mechanics. That idea that I was just telling you about like a new bro that gets a criminal flag and then undocks and loses a second ship, right? Like, that happens all the time. And if that happens and ganks are happening, eventually those are going to happen at close enough time to be detected and seen as being a legitimate implication of this exploit. But worse is people could be tricked into doing it. People could be tricked into doing it, right? You get a new bro, you for some reason, somehow convince them to go criminal, and then tell them it's okay, you know, whatever. And then, just undock, you know, you'll be fine. Just take a Corvette out. And then they do that. You already have a pre-staged gank ready to go. You have an eye on the station. As soon as you see him gank, or you don't even have to have eyes on the station. You just sit on, you don't even have to plan this out, because you could just sit on the grid, and as soon as Concord gets pulled away, you instantly gank. And then whoever just did it gets banned. So you could trick somebody into doing that. And worse, you wouldn't even have to wait for the opportunity, because you could also be the gank target. If your goal was to mess with a player, you could set him up to get him to undock and pull away Concord, gank your own alt, and then report yourself and him, that or whatever, to CCP for the exploit and get him banned if it was implemented as it is stated. And it would be very, very difficult to detect that without manual oversight. And this could be the single most biggest cause of positive flags that they have if this was true, because they're literally trying to make a mechanic that didn't have to be this way in the game. Now, if you use it, it's an exploit, which is bonkers. So, and if people want to say, oh, well, people wouldn't do that. They wouldn't sacrifice their own accounts or go through all that work just to get some rando banned. I want to take this opportunity to dive into one of the darkest moments in the EVE community, collectively. So to get into that, we're going to first talk about a not terrible guy, Ripper Teg. Ripper Teg was known as, when I first joined the game, he was known as the Robo-Blogger. He blogged like daily. When I first started writing for EVE, he was my inspiration. Or, well, I actually started writing for Battletech, right? MechWarrior Online, that's what it was. But then I quickly got pulled back into EVE. But so this guy blogged all the time. He originally started doing it so that way he could get elected. He failed to get elected the first year. He blogged like literally more than 365 times in the total year, and got elected the next year. So, but the thing is that this article on Monday, March 24th, 2014, let's look at his final post real quick. So in March, he posts this. Within 1 month, the Robo-Blogger goes from tent post articles and analysis of super capital deaths and all this sort of stuff to hanging up his hat and going and stopping his blog, right? And so, first of all, that's, as we dig into this, realize that Jester Trek literally basically gave up his career to expose this information. So there is a pilot named Erotica 1 who did ISK doubling like everybody else, or, like a lot of people, I should say, in JITA. And he would follow up with the ISK doubling with the concept that, like, you've won and you're the lucky 100. So you get to be in the bonus room. And so they pull him into the bonus room. And the bonus room would be like a mumble or a, TeamSpeak, I think, from that time. There's a recording. It's like over an hour long. I've listened to it. We're not going to listen to it right now. Mostly because it would take too long it's very insidious. So it would take too long to listen to it. But you're welcome to if you want to. So the way it worked was, ISK doubling. You give me ISK, I double it for you. It's a trust exercise. So the bonus room was the next stage. You give me everything, and I will, double it or more ever. Yeah, I'll link it. So first thing they do is attempt to get them to contract all of their assets, send all of their ISK to Erotica 1, turn over all items within their redemption system, turn over all PI, cancel any jobs going on and turn over the blueprints, turn over all their clothing, convert all of their LP into stuff and then give that stuff over, turn over all balances of any EVE-related gambling sites, which, didn't exist or don't exist anymore. They would also go further than that, right? So once they have all of your stuff, they now have you. And so they basically begin a process of increasingly fucking with the person, right? They use the ISK doubling system, much like a scammer or like a Norwegian, not Norwegian, whatever, the prince, the Nigerian prince scam, right? The scam was intended to simply screen out people that would not have made good victims, right? So it pre-selected for people that were vulnerable. And they would, get all their stuff and then make them do weird things like read the code from James 514 or whatever. And like they interrupt him over and over again and like get into his pronunciation and make him start over and make him define words and all this stuff. And as he gets more and more frustrated, they just keep doing it, until literally they break. And then when they do that, then they don't have to give him back anymore because he rage quit the bonus room. But let's be very clear about what this was. This is not the game. This was not part of EVE Online. This was using EVE Online to find victims for real life abuse, and the utilization of EVE mechanics for that that abuse. Another thing that they used to do, or another thing they would do, is after doing all of this, they would make you undock your clone in an alpha clone, which back then alpha clone meant no skill points, or like very few skill points were preloaded. Therefore, and they would pod them over and over again, and therefore destroy any skill points that they have. Like, they would just completely decimate everything that this person has. You see, like, and they had a team of people that all worked together in order to make this happen. And the nightmare about this situation was the fact that when this occurred, there was a loud portion of the player base that defended it, that thought that this is something that CCP should not do anything about because it did not happen in game, right? They pulled the person out of the game. And ultimately, CCP made the choice to permanently ban Erotica 1 and several of their compatriots. It caused a lot of drama, and ultimately, I think it was the right decision. One of the interesting things that came out of this is, if I remember correctly, this was one of the ones that was like, there's like a 250-page thread knot that spawned on this thing on the EVE forums. But then CCP went through and did analysis. I think this was the one where they did the analysis and discovered that like 95% of the posts were created by 7 people or something like that. It was kind of nonsense. So yeah, when we talk about the EVE player base and our behavior to one another, you got to remember that, like, the old EVE was a pretty dark place, and there was a lot of people that celebrated that. So as we move forward, especially as like old guard talk about the old ways or whatever, often what they're hearkening to is an environment in which basically experienced people could take advantage of less experienced people, because the game was confusing and, you know, you could make mistakes. And this was just kind of the apex of the be a villain, bad behavior mentality that was really prevalent in EVE Online at this time. And this is only 2014. And this became such a big deal. Like I said, this guy stopped blogging, I'm pretty sure, in part because of this. Like, Jester could always correct me. But yeah, and that's the Erotica 1 story. That's the bonus room. Huh. Yeah, CCP didn't want to be accessory to possible crimes. That was a big part of it. And like I said, it's subtle. Like, as I listened to it, there was nothing that like jumped out at me as like explicitly bad in itself. And maybe I like blocked it out of my memory. But it's more the gradual wearing down and fucking with him and forcing him to become, you know, destabilizing him and then pushing on those screws until to cause the maximum amount of hurt. And you could really tell that the money wasn't what was important, right? The stuff that they took from him wasn't important, because by the time they started, that was already done. They used the sunk cost fallacy of all of the stuff that they forced them to hand over to get them to stay longer so they could hurt them more. It was fucked up. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like talking about it very much. But like I said, I believe that CCP did the right answer, and we've come a long way since then. All right. On to something more positive.